The next thing that we want to talk about is your vocal tone, and whether or not you're monotone or whether or not you're a dynamic public speaker. Public speakers, good public speakers, all have a nice richness in their voice, and that means that they are vocally varied. They're not just one tone. One tone would just basically be, something that was, kind of one specific pitch. So I'll try to give you a little bit of speech that is just one tone. If I were to speak in a monotone voice, it would sound very much like this, and there would not be very much vocal richness in what I was saying, as opposed to how I normally present, which is a little bit more sing-songy. It's a little bit more vocally rich and diverse, and has a lot more different intonations in it than just that one monotone kind of thing. You've seen the Clear Eyes commercials. Ben Stein does a really good job of being very monotone in that. If you saw Ferris Bueller's Day Off, he'll say Bueller, 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 anyone, Bueller. That's a good example of a really monotone type of delivery. That's something that you want to avoid at all costs as a good public speaker. Next, we'll talk about articulation and diction. Are you mushed mouth, or are you someone who's really articulating your consonants? Really, if you're speaking out of the sides of your mouth, then you're probably going to be someone who has really good articulation. Try to get your mouth moving and speak out of the corners of your mouth, and that will help you with your articulation. The farther away someone is from you, and the more mushed mouth you are, the more difficulty they're going to have hearing you in the back of a room. If you speak and over-articulate your words, you can over-articulate those words and project all the way to the back of a room, and people will not have any problem hearing you or understanding what you're saying. Next, I'd like to talk to you about nervous or distracting habits. Nervous and distracting habits. And I have a couple of things that are going to help me demonstrate what exactly I'm talking about in terms of nervous and distracting habits. These are two things that I never take into a public speaking situation with me. They are my car keys and a pen that has a cap that I can potentially play with. You can participate in all sorts of nervous, distracting habits. For instance, I could talk to a group and I could just kind of do something with a pen cap just like that the entire time. And although that sort of decreases some of the nerves that I have, I'm finding it very difficult to speak coherently and to do that all at the same time because it requires coordination. I'm doing two things at once. The other thing that I can do is stick my hand in my pocket and kind of mess around with my keys like that. Once again, although it decreases the amount of communication anxiety that I'm experiencing right now, it becomes something that's ultimately kind of noisy and sort of distracting. So I try to minimize those distractions, and I take things that I know that I'm going to play with and I set them aside for myself whenever I'm in a public speaking situation. Some of the ladies in the class may have a problem, playing with their hair or pulling on their hair or constantly adjusting their hair or constantly adjusting, a skirt or something like that. If it's not comfortable, then you shouldn't be speaking in it. Try to speak in some very comfortable clothes that convey a proper appearance, that you're not wrestling with them the whole time that you're speaking. Some other folks have demonstrated some proclivity in the past to play around with jewelry, or to mess around with something like that. Or to constantly kind of fidget with a ring or a necklace or a watch. If it's something that you're going to play with the entire time that you're up here, take it off, set it down, leave it at your student station before you come up to address the class, and it will really allow you to focus more on what you're saying and allow your audience to focus more on those things too. Next, we're going to talk about speaking stance, and we'll discuss that. We'll talk about a couple of different ones that we want to avoid and some ones that we want to encourage. The first speaking stance is just your regular, traditional, good speaking stance, and that is your feet about shoulder width apart. You want to have them about shoulder width apart, and you want to have the toes slightly turned out. That's going to prevent you from kind of leaning back and forth in one way or the other whenever you're speaking in front of the group of class members. The one that we really want to avoid, and this is one that a lot of ladies in the class have a tendency to do, is the supermodel stance. You get a little bit nervous. You kind of cross one leg over the other one. You sort of sit there and kind of rock back and forth and rock your weight, back and forth on that one. That does not convey a lot of authority. It doesn't convey that you really know what you're talking about. It conveys that I want to kind of be away, from the audience, and that I don't want you to really look at me, and that I don't feel comfortable, speaking in front of you. And I call it the supermodel stance because you oftentimes see spokesmodels standing like this, and they kind of turn to the side because they think that, it's really slimming. So that's the supermodel stance. You want to avoid that one. One of the ones that some of you gentlemen engage in is a stance that is not shoulder width apart, but in fact a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. And you kind of sit there, and it's sort of comfortable. You kind of sit there like that, That also does not convey a lot of seriousness or a lot of preparation, and it doesn't convey that you're really somebody who ought to be taken seriously. I call that the Forrest Gump stance. So if you find yourself doing that, you're either the supermodel or Forrest Gump. You want to avoid both of those at all costs. Next are word choices, and although I'm flattered that many of you feel comfortable enough in front of me to kind of let your hair down and to use more colorful language than you might typically in some other classes, it is a public speaking circumstance. It is a somewhat formal occasion, and you want to try to refrain from using non-formal word choices. So don't come in and drop the F-bomb, don't use a lot of sailor language, don't use a lot of locker room talk, things that you wouldn't want to see broadcast on YouTube someday. So make sure that you refrain from using those types of language choices. You want to be scholarly, you want to be academic, you want to have been practiced. You don't want to have a whole lot of uhs and ums and things like that. You want to make sure that you convey to the audience that you've taken preparation for this moment seriously and that you're not going to waste any of their time. Finally, we're going to talk about fluency breaks. Fluency breaks are just little slips of the tongue or corrections of things that you've said. Perhaps a elongated pause. Those are things like fluency breaks. So you want to avoid those things, and you want to refrain from using a lot of uhs and ums. Today we talked about nonverbal delivery in your Speech 1113 class, and I hope that you got a lot out of this video, and hopefully your speeches will improve as a result of it. Thank you very much.